Is existence just a random intersection of events, a crossing of matter over matter, of thought over thought that is totally random? Is there any significance to the experiences that we are encountering at this time? And I've said we are in perilous times. And is it just a randomness? Is it just something that happens over and over again? There is plenty of commentary on the idea that there is a cyclical event. It's an almost detached view of existence in the sense that we repeat ourselves in some form or other, that there are holocausts and monumental epic destructions that have occurred over and over again on this planet. I've always said as well that I don't even remember my shopping list from last week, never mind epic events a billion years ago, 100 million years ago, or 200 years ago. Maybe a little more, 200 years ago. There is maybe direct evidence. I had grandparents, I met my grandparents. My thoughts today are to just comment again on making sense in some way. I'd like to make sense on stuff in some way. I'd like to understand why it is we're going through what we are going through. Not just to be another current event provider to you on YouTube. Like 99% or a great portion of it is like current event providers with their little commentary on current events. I'm a lot more interested in creating a context to discover possibly meaning. What is the meaning behind something? Is it just random? Are these just random occurrences that we're encountering and they repeat themselves? I think they're valid questions, especially when we get to the point where our entire human capacity becomes involved from the point of view of thought, feeling, emotion, what we experience as suffering or joy. These are all elements that need to be considered in understanding what I consider to be not random but meaning. As soon as there is meaning, randomness disappears from me. There is no point in repeating something through meaning, in the sense that meaning is a guide towards. It's not like you end up in the same place you started from. There is some reason. The reason there is meaning is because we've discovered something that we didn't know about before. So meaning fundamentally gives us access to what I enjoy talking about, eternity even. This is kind of like a bit of an eternity thought idea that I'm invoking once more. And to all the current event providers, some of them are more important and interesting to me than others. I want to shout out to Quantum of Conscience, who's really plugging away at exposing what it is our reality really is all about. And he's saying, don't blame the bastards, it's our fault. And he does, to a degree, have a point. He has a point. But you also need to understand and listen to current event providers, and a little more than that, actually. I appreciate Lonnie Clark, for example, on giving us the reports on the nuclear pollution, which is actually devastating the environment. People are out there providing us with information, current events that highlight something that is so significant and important. Dana Durnford on his daily broadcast talking about Fukushima and what has happened to the Pacific Ocean. These are events that have occurred. And Quantum of Conscience says, well, just say no. Cut them off. They need us, cut them off. Yes, of course, cut them off, but we're left with a major issue in what I call an extermination. Through this chemical and nuclear pollution, we are now so under threat, and all of life is under threat, that what is required to step forward, to step out of this, what seems to be a random reoccurrence of the same thing over and over again, whether it's micro or macro, whether it's billions of years or centuries. I don't know what this repetitive cycle is about, but I'm going to say that it is rooted in our perception that there is no meaning, that people are quite desperate from the point of view that there is no meaning. And when I give commentary, and my commentary usually is rooted in my understanding of what it means to be a painter. I make paintings, I conjure imagery, I create objects. I'm not abstract because I make objects. Abstract is a purely mental fabrication. There is no such thing as an abstract painting. The object itself exists, so it's real, it's not abstract. We create labels and nuances to something which is simply, actually, in its essence, nothing what we are trying to make it out to be. So abstraction is a fabrication, is something in our heads. It's not actually real. Even the images, the patterning that you see behind me are considered abstractions, but they're not because they're real objects. So this is, I'm going to introduce another element to my commentary, besides the fact that you all know I am huge on conscience. And the idea that AI, which I see as a Trojan horse to extract conscience out of consciousness. And AI is all about consciousness, not conscience. And this is important for me because I see the connection and I see a development that is happening under our noses. And through a YouTuber called Deborah Mahmoudi, she suggested that the Bitcoin phenomenon is actually there to map the complex equations involved in our DNA, which makes a lot of sense to me. And in a roundabout way, the AI also is a reference to the idea of mapping something, or more importantly, the AI, what I say, is a way to take conscience in some form out of consciousness. And everything is consciousness. People, rocks, crystals, lampshades, everything is consciousness. Matter is consciousness. And the energy that Einstein understood to be E equals mc squared, it's interchangeable. Energy, mass, substance is interchangeable, as is thought on a certain level. The way I experience thought in my work becomes interchangeable. In a sense, my thought is an object, a 3D, it's an object in existence. It's not abstract. That's what I said. All right, so I'm going to try to keep this short. My thoughts today, for reflections on meaning. And one of the things that are obstacles to discovering or to feeling, having a sense of meaning or connection even to something or one another, is predicated on an activity that is devoid, I will say, that is devoid of what I call secondary gain. And this is a concept that's nothing new. The idea of secondary gain is that you do something in order to get something out of it. And this is a fundamental flaw within the structure, how society and culture has structured itself, that you're, for example, rewarded when you're doing something. And there is nothing wrong with finding, for being rewarded for some kind of effort that we've made. Let's say if we go and we fix somebody's plumbing and you are rewarded by being paid with some exchange, with money, for example. There is nothing wrong with that. And this is where it becomes nuanced, the idea of secondary gain as a block to feeling connected to the potential of creating meaning in our lives. The complexity behind this interaction of being involved in an existence in the world, doing things that are not predicated on being rewarded. And it usually doesn't make sense, because why would I do anything if there isn't something in it for me? And it makes sense from the point of view that we exist, and being people of little faith, we say to ourselves, we need to insist on being paid for that what we do. But as a painter, I'm going to invoke this again, the idea of being involved in an activity that is considered art, the art has, for me, never been made. I have never made my work with the concept, with the idea that there would be a reward on the other end. I love selling my paintings. Seeing my paintings on people's walls is extremely gratifying. But the painting that is sitting on the wall never was made from my initial impulse, never was made to be rewarded in some way. It actually gets more complex because the activity itself and my process through making paintings in itself becomes a reward, but this is another aspect to it. So the idea that I'm attempting to instill in people, even like Quantum of Conscience, who is exposing the bastards beautifully, actually saying, don't blame them, blame yourselves, which is also true, except when, of course, we're under threat from pollution to the extent that to the extent that we're being threatened. I'm proposing what I believe people such as Matt of Quantum of Conscience and Lonnie Clark and Dana Durnford have innately understood as well, that you do something not with the idea of being rewarded for it, because there is fundamentally a disconnect between thinking that you will have some specific result at the other end of some activity that you perform. There is no guarantee in any sense. This is an experience that is open-ended, which ends up with this sense of meaning just because you're doing it. This is my proposition. The idea of meaning is predicated in some form or other on not thinking of oneself as having to end up in a certain place, which is kind of an anomalous formulation from the point of view that meaning suggests something very concrete at the end of something, or the reason why you're doing something, but it's very nebulous in a sense. This is not something I can definitely pin. What is the meaning to you? What is the meaning to me? It is within the doing something that is not connected to a result. This is meaning. I find this to be extremely liberating. And I also think, this is my conclusion as well, that once we're able to dissociate ourselves from this continuous feeling of having to gain something as a secondary gain. There is obviously, if there's a secondary, there's a primary gain. And what is the primary gain? Is the activity we perform unselfishly for ourselves and for others that will end up in a result that will be quite gratifying and meaningful. So to eliminate the secondary gain, which would be superimposed on this feeling that we naturally have as children, are curious and are doing things without any sort of thought in mind about what it was going to end up as, and they're not being told, well, you're a fabulous artist and you're going to sell your art. They're actually telling kids when they're 5, 6, 10 years old, oh, you're a fantastic artist and you can sell your art, and all this kind of hooey that is put into our brain, which diverts us from this fundamental sense we have that we don't need to get something in return. And once this, I guess, what I'm saying is, once this is active in us, like conscience, I'm a big believer in conscience. Once this is active within us, this fundamental feeling of meaning will allow us to choose the right thing, because the meaning in our life is not a dysfunctional culture and society. There is no meaning in that other than destruction, and destruction is a kind of finality. It ends. Destruction, things end. Even though you can say it's a rebirth maybe kind of thing, destruction and rebirth. But my real fear here is that with the level of chemical and nuclear pollution, there is no revival, even in terms of maybe even 1,000,000 years. I don't know. And once this experience in terms of complexity in life is eliminated, does it just happen all over again? I am not ready to kiss off on this. I think we need to make a stand. We truly need to make a stand on this. And the only way we're going to make a stand is if we feel the meaning in our lives. We need to feel this meaning in our lives, and we'll get to that meaning much more rapidly and clearly without the secondary gains in mind. So eliminate all the stuff that you'd like to have as a result. Eliminate the secondary gain. And I think we're going to make progress. And my shout out to Quantum of Conscience. He did this movie compilation of listing all the usual suspects and saying, just say no. They need us. Well, I wish it was as simple as that. Just say no. Just say no. Yeah, don't go to Walmart. Don't buy the shit. Don't comply with the general notions of culture. Don't comply. Yes, compliance is absolutely part of the problem. But the reason people comply is because there is no inner sense of meaning. That's why. So we got to get to this inner source and do the inner work and look in the mirror every now and then and feel gratified. Love yourself, but more, love yourself, yes, all that stuff. But more important, invoke the most important part, the thing that makes me love myself is saying that I'm doing the right thing. This is what's required. It's love yourself doesn't just come because there you are. No, at this point in time, maybe when you're 5 or 6 or even 10, but at this point in time, when you're 30, 40, 50, 60 more, you have to do the right thing in order to love yourself.